Now here is where I ruined the painting. Hi, I'm Marie. I am a 32-year-old artist living somewhere in Canada. And today we are going to talk about this beautiful painting that I've been working on for a few weeks. I'm going to share a little bit about my creative process and how we got here. Honestly, I want to talk about my brainstorming and my inspiration and my initial sketches, some techniques that I did and some mistakes that I made along the way, and how I plan to fix those mistakes. My intention with this video is to not only share my creative process, but to maybe give you some insight on how you can navigate your creative process, what changes that you would need to make, or just if you have a process that works for you. I love that. Please share, because that is something that I enjoy watching and learning about in other artists. So I hope you get some value out of this video, and yeah, keep watching. Sometimes when I have an idea for a painting, I get the initial inspiration in a number of ways. It could be either through song lyrics, it could be a poem or a book or a title, or it could even be a picture. For this one in particular, I was inspired by a picture that I saw on Instagram, and I think it's been floating around Instagram and TikTok of these two beautiful women sitting back to back, and they had flowers in their hair. I knew I didn't want the flowers, so I ended up taking that out of the sketch and replacing it with the braids that you see here. So I'll pull up the video of my iPad of me working on the initial sketches and renderings of how I wanted to change and kind of add my own twist to this painting. You can see in the initial sketch, I knew right away that I wanted this kind of gradient coming from the bottom up to the top, a dark kind of maroon color all the way up to a more yellow at the top, which is what you see in the initial painting. In this painting, when I started the background, I ended up using, I think it was a magenta type of color down here, and then red, and then fluorescent orange acrylic color up here. After I was done and I put my sketch on, I realized that the orange color up here was not as yellow as I had initially wanted. I knew I wanted the blue gradient going the opposite direction, and I specifically wanted blue to complement the yellow that was going to be in the face, because blue and yellow are really nice complementary colors. So when I had put my sketch on and I was finished with my background, I realized that it was not the color that I was hoping for. So I did try and layer another yellow acrylic over top of the face, but the yellow that I had was a little bit too transparent and it didn't give the effect that I wanted. So I settled on this more like orangey color, and I thought, I'm just gonna leave it where it is. I think it's fine, but I really wish I had remembered to go with a brighter, almost lemony, or like a lemony yellow as opposed to this dark orange. So that was one of my first mistakes that I made, but I decided to just go with it. After I finished the background and I had put in my initial sketch and I started painting the first layer of oil paint, I went in with a dark magenta color instead of going with a brown skin tone color like I initially thought I was going to do. I just remembered that I had magenta, and I knew that the magenta with the orange again would be really beautiful complementary colors. So that's what I went with, and I'm really happy that I did that instead of brown. Because the magenta color is transparent, I did one layer of the thin magenta, and then I waited 24 hours and I went back in with another layer of magenta. I am happy with where it's at right now, but I believe I am going to go back in with one more layer just to kind of touch up some areas that are a little bit patchy and just not as like punchy as I would like them to be. Especially in this arm area down here, I think it's looking a little muted. So far the background layer is still acrylic. The second layer of shadows is oil paint. And then what I went in with next, which looking back, I think I should have waited to do this step, but I was really excited to finish this, so I went in with black oil paint to do the hair. I went in with like thick layers of black paint because I wanted the texture, I wanted it to stand out, I wanted the hair to just be like the main focal point of the whole piece. What I should have done is I should have waited until I was done the background and done everything else and then go in with the layer of black. But again, I kind of got ahead of myself. I was getting a little bit impatient with the drying time of the oil, and I thought I just wanted to get the hair part done because the thick layer of paint is going to take a while to dry anyways, and that's what led me to that decision. However, I love that there is some texture, and there's going to be even more texture when I go in with the second layer of black paint. In my initial drawing, I did want the hair to be a little bit more connected because that was kind of the idea behind this piece, was just connectedness, sisterhood, motherhood, whatever female figures you wanted to place in the figure, like project onto this figure, that's what I wanted. So I wanted her braid to kind of lead into her braid, but with where they were and the type of hair that I wanted to do, because I knew I wanted one ponytail and I knew I wanted her to have two, so it's a little bit off center. It doesn't line up the way that I had initially thought about in my mind. However, I think it still looks beautiful this way. I think from far away you can it does look like they're going into each other, and your eye kind of goes down and up and down and up. So I think my message still comes across that way. Let me know if you guys think that's true. Maybe it's not giving what I think it's giving. But that was my thought process with the hair, is I just wanted it to be connected. She has two braids down here for no reason other than I just love the two braids. I think that just looks so cool. So before I was finished anything else, and again I was excited, I went straight in with white highlights. Again, I probably should have waited until I was done the entire painting before I go in with highlights. All of us know that highlights are the best part, okay? I just was too excited and I just went in. But luckily I think anything that I need to fix is not really going to affect where I put the highlights, so I'm not too worried about it. It still looks beautiful. Now here is where I ruined the painting. I really wanted to get the background on. I knew the background was going to be in oil paint, so after my figures were dry, I completely taped them up so that I could do a thick layer of blue oil paint on the background. I knew I wanted to be more of a natural sky blue, so I believe I used a cerulean blue, and then I can't remember the name of this blue, but I mixed it with titanium white to get this really nice gradient, and I loved how it turned out. When I initially taped it on, I didn't want any of this orange and red color to peek through the blue. I wanted the blue to be very opaque, very rich, very, very thick layer of paint, so you cannot see any of this color in the background. So to avoid any of that color peeking through, I went in with a layer of acrylic paint. And remember, the background was all acrylic, so in hindsight, and if it was a different painting, that would have been a good technique. But because I had already started on my initial layer of oil paint, and as you know, or maybe you don't know, when you tape something, the paint always seeps through the tape, always seeps through the edges. So I kind of knew that was going to happen, and I did it anyways, because if the red and the orange would have peeked through, that would have been extra layers of oil paints that I think I would have needed to cover up that color peeking through, and I didn't want to deal with that. So I painted the whole background white, and then I went over it with the blue oil paint. I let that sit for a few more days, and then when it was ready to peel off and I did my satisfying tape peel, I'm left with this, which is layers of acrylic paint all around my figure. And I don't know if you know, you may know, you may not know, acrylic paint doesn't sit well on top of oil paint. It'll peel, it'll crack, it's not archival, and sometimes you can break rules in painting and art, as you know. This is not one of the rules that you can break. It usually doesn't work, and I knew that, but I did it anyways. So now here we are. Luckily, I did some brainstorming, and I think how I plan to fix this is through sanding. I do have some sandpaper. I also have a nail drill that I could probably use to be more precise and sand away a little bit, because it's not too much, but it's enough that like I don't want to damage the canvas or sand away the orange color that's underneath. It did, like you can see here, the tape did give me some nice clean edges. It's not going to be too much of a fix. It's just adding more time onto an already long process. Overall, I am happy with the way that it turned out. But one thing I forgot to do, as you can see in my initial sketch, I had clouds in the background, which I was going to do on top of before I did the paint peel, I was going to add in a thin layer of clouds. And again, I got too excited, I got ahead of myself, I did the tape peel and said, shit, I forgot the clouds. What I'm going to do to fix that is I'm just gonna wait till I'm done the entire thing. The paint is, for the most part, although it is dry, there are still some spots that are kind of wet. So this painting has been sitting for a little bit over 3 weeks. I know my acrylic painters are just like, why? Like, that's so long. But I think oil paint is just one of those things where you can't fight it. It is what it is. Once my background is completely dry, I'm gonna go in with a layer of white titanium paint to add backgrounds or clouds moving down in the background, so they're not just like floating in space, and it gives a little bit more of a story. That really brings us to where we are right now, which is what we are working with. I'm actually very proud of how it's going so far. I don't have a name for this piece yet. Sometimes when I'm working on a project, the name comes first, the idea comes first, the image comes first. It really depends on what I'm working on at the time. For this one in particular, I know I want these figures to represent womanhood, sisterhood, some type of female relationship, whatever that is. So the name of the piece is really centered around that. I like the word tethered. That's what keeps coming to my head, but that might be a little bit too literal from what I'm going for. So I'm not sure if that's what the name is going to be, or I'm going to pick something else. Sometimes I'm inspired by music titles or poems or names and places, and that can influence what I name my piece. But oftentimes I like to let my piece tell me what it wants to be called. And sometimes that's at the beginning, and sometimes it's at the end when I'm done. So we're still working on a title, but it is inspired by female relationships. That is where the braids come from. I just love the idea of braids being such a universal language for women, and it's something that is going to come up a lot more in my work. So I really wanted that to be like the emphasis of this painting and like the connectedness. So that's where we're at. Let me know your thoughts. What do you guys think of the process, my mistakes? I really wanted this to kind of be like a sharing moment where we can talk about our failures as artists and how, not necessarily our failures, okay. We can talk about our mistakes as an artist and how it's really part of the process. It's not anything to run away from. I think as frustrating as it can be to make mistakes, that's also kind of the fun, because you remember the next time, like, I don't want to do what I did again, so we're going to do better this time. And that's really all this is. I think it's fun to just like learn and have that love-hate relationship with your work. So that's it. Let me know your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will see you in the next one. Mwah.